charity case. The words landed loud enough for half the dining hall to hear. Kwon Seo-yeon didn't even look up from her lunch when she said it. She didn't need to. She already knew exactly where Nia was sitting. And Nia heard it. Every syllable. She set her pen down slowly, looked across the hall, met Seo-yeon's eyes for exactly 1 second calm, unbothered, unreadable. Then she picked her pen back up and kept writing. What Seo-yeon didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that the girl they were laughing at was already the most powerful person in the building. She had a secret that would bring this entire institution to its knees, and she was in absolutely no rush to reveal it. Nia had arrived at Haneul University 3 days earlier. 2 bags, a small backpack, a scholarship letter, with no ceremony attached to it. No family name, no connections. An orphan since she was 4. What she had was a mind that worked differently, faster, deeper, quieter, and a patience so absolute it looked, to everyone watching, like she simply didn't care. She cared, more than any of them knew. The university was one of the most prestigious in the country. Old buildings, older reputations. Students who arrived already knowing each other, connected by family names and the quiet confidence of people who had never once doubted their place in a room. If Haneul University had a center of gravity, it was Kwon Seo-yeon, 3rd-generation legacy student, father on the board of trustees. She moved through campus the way weather moves. You didn't choose whether to notice her. You simply did. She noticed Nia on the very first day, not with warmth, with the particular attention certain people give to things that don't fit, the slight narrowing of the eyes, the slow assessment, the quiet decision rendered without a word spoken. She said nothing to Nia that first day. She didn't have to. The way she looked at her then, through her, communicated everything. You don't belong here. Nia met her gaze for exactly 1 second, then returned to her book. That, as it turned out, was the wrong thing to do. It started with a word: charity case. Seo-yeon said it at lunch on the 3rd day, not to Nia directly, but in that carefully constructed way where the target is close enough to hear and far enough away to have no clean response. Another scholarship intake, she murmured to her table, glancing across the hall. They keep letting them in without proper vetting. It changes the atmosphere. Her table laughed in the soft, practiced way of people who understand social choreography. By the end of the week, the word had spread, quietly, efficiently, everywhere at once. Charity case, the orphan, nobody. Nia heard it. She heard all of it. She sat in her corner of the library, and she heard every whisper, and she did what she had taught herself to do in years of being overlooked in places that were supposed to care for her. She kept working. Her notebooks filled. Her mind moved. She attended every lecture and sat in the front row and asked the kind of questions that made professors pause and reconsider their prepared answers. If anyone had been paying attention, really paying attention, they might have noticed something unusual about the way she worked. But no one was paying attention to Nia. They never thought they needed to. It was Professor Jang who first changed the temperature of the room. He was lecturing on contemporary innovation theory when he wrote a single word on the board: eclipse. For those of you pursuing careers in technology, design, or any field that intersects with the future, he said, this is the name you need to understand. Eclipse was not a company. Not exactly. It was a mind anonymous, prolific, and so far ahead of contemporary thinking that academic institutions had spent 2 years trying to identify who was behind the work. Papers published under that name had reshaped entire industries. A foundation operating under that name had funded 47 initiatives in underserved communities across the globe. No one knew who Eclipse was. That was the point. The greatest mystery in modern intellectual circles, Professor Jang said. What I believe is that whoever it is they are, sitting on something that will define the next decade. Seo-yeon leaned forward, fascinated. In the front row, Nia turned a page in her notebook. What happened behind Nia's dormitory door was not something she advertised. Every night after dinner, she locked it, sat at her desk, opened a laptop that looked unremarkable. A small, slightly worn machine that no one would look at twice. And she worked. Not on assignments. Those she completed in the margins of other things, almost as a reflex. She worked on the things that mattered. The things she had been building for years. Her phone received calls from numbers that would mean nothing to anyone on this campus but would make the heads of companies turn. She responded to emails addressed to a name that was not on any campus record. She had started all of it at 15. In an orphanage, on a donated computer with a cracked screen and 20 minutes of daily internet access. She had built something real from nothing. That was the thing about Nia. Everyone saw the nothing she had started with. No one saw what she had built from it. Not yet. In the third month of the semester, Hanail University announced its most prestigious annual event, the Hanail Innovation Summit. One student, one presentation. A panel of judges from the highest levels of industry, academia, and private investment. The winner received full funding for their project and the kind of visibility that could alter an entire career. Xiao-Yan announced her entry with the composure of someone who considered the outcome already decided. Her project was extraordinary, 18 months of work, and she knew it. When the sign-up sheet was posted, her name was first. She was reviewing it the next morning when she saw the second name. Nia Serena Michael. She stared at it for a moment. Then she turned to the friend beside her and laughed a short, clean sound. She signed up, she said simply. It was not a compliment. She said it the way someone says interesting when they mean harmless, when they mean no real threat, when they mean, I have already won. The weeks before the summit divided the campus into those competing and those watching. Xiao-Yan worked with the precision of someone groomed her entire life for exactly this moment. Mentors, resources, advisors her father had quietly arranged, professional slides, delivery rehearsed until it felt spontaneous. She was going to win. Everyone who knew her knew it. What no one could explain was Nia. She didn't form a preparation group. She didn't book rehearsal space. She attended her regular classes, sat in her corner of the library, and appeared to be doing absolutely nothing different. There was one person, though, who watched her differently. Junho, a third-year transfer student who sat 3 rows behind her in Professor Zhang's class. From the very first week, he had noticed that her questions landed like stones thrown into deep water long after she asked them. The ripples were still spreading. He tried once, briefly, to speak to her in the library. "You're preparing for the summit?" he asked. "I'm always preparing," she said, without looking up. He smiled at that, quietly. The way someone smiles when they recognize something they weren't expecting to find. He didn't push. He simply left a coffee on the corner of her table and walked away. She looked at it for a moment, then kept working, but she didn't move the coffee. One of Xiao-Yan's friends reported back after watching Nia one afternoon. "She's just sitting there, reading, like she forgot she entered." "Some people enter things they can't finish," So-Yun said. "It happens." She was not worried. She should have been. The night before the summit, Xiao-Yan did a final run-through at 11 p.m. Flawless. Every word, every transition, every pause for effect. She turned off her light at midnight, satisfied. She was going to walk into that hall tomorrow and remind everyone exactly who she was. Across campus, Nia's light was still on. She was on a call quiet, measured, the kind of conversation between two people who had spoken many times and trusted each other completely. "Are you certain?" the voice on the other end asked. "Yes," Nia said. "You understand what happens after this." "I do." A pause. "Then it's time," the voice said. "It's been time for a while." Nia closed the laptop, looked at her room, the 2 bags, the small backpack, the locked wardrobe, the ordinary surface of an extraordinary life. She had chosen this school, this year, this specific moment. She had been waiting for the right time to stop being invisible. Tomorrow was that time. The Hanail Innovation Summit was held in the university's Grand Hall. The panel of judges sat at a long table industry names, academic heavyweights, two people whose presence alone signaled the seriousness of the occasion. Seo-yeon presented third. She was magnificent, controlled, compelling, her project outlined with the clarity and confidence of someone born for stages. The applause was genuine and sustained. Two judges leaned forward to make notes. One smiled. She returned to her seat and allowed herself, quietly, to feel certain. And then Nia's name was called. She walked to the front in a simple dark outfit, carrying nothing but a small tablet. No elaborate slides, no prepared handouts. Just her standing in front of the most important room she had ever been in, looking completely at home. What happened in the next 20 minutes was difficult to describe to people who were not there. It was not a presentation in the traditional sense. It was a mind, a genuinely extraordinary mind, thinking out loud with complete precision. Every sentence landed with the weight of something considered from every possible angle and distilled into its purest form. She spoke about systems, about the gap between innovation and implementation, about what gets lost when the people closest to a problem are excluded from its solution. She referenced live, documented, already operational work, real numbers, real outcomes, real communities, changed by one person, quietly, over several years. The judges stopped writing. They were just listening. One of them, a woman at the end of the table who had said nothing during any previous presentation, leaned slowly forward. "Can you tell us the name under which this work has been filed?" she asked carefully. "The foundation, the published papers," end quote. Ah. The room was completely silent. Nia held the woman's gaze. "Eclipse," she said. The word fell into the room and did not bounce. It sank, deep and slow, and as it sank, the understanding followed it down, moving from person to person across the grand hall. The judge sat back in her chair. Her expression was not shock exactly. It was the expression of someone whose long-held suspicion had just been confirmed. "Your eclipse," she said, not a question. "Yes," Nia said. The room broke open, not in chaos and the particular noise of a large group of people processing something simultaneously. Professor Jang, sitting in the faculty row, put his pen down slowly and stared at the young woman who had sat in his front row all semester asking questions that, he now understood, came from a place far beyond his curriculum. And Seo-yeon sat perfectly still, replaying things, the library, the dining hall, the sign-up sheet. Every moment she had looked at this woman and seen nothing. Every moment she had laughed. The judge at the end of the table stood up, something judges do not do mid-summit. "I am the chair of the Global Innovation Council," she said. "We have spent 2 years searching for Eclipse. We assumed, as most people assume, that someone doing this caliber of work would be visible, would be celebrated, would be known." She looked at Nia. "Instead," she said quietly, "she was here, in this room. And from what I am now understanding, she was treated as though she did not belong." The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was the silence of a room full of people confronting something about themselves they could not immediately defend. Seo-yeon stared at the table. Her hands were folded, very still, very controlled. But her jaw was tight, and her eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with pride. When the summit concluded, the grand hall became a different kind of room. The judges moved toward Nia not with careful politeness, but with the genuine forward lean of people who wanted to be near something real. And Seo-yeon stood at the back. She had not left. When the crowd around Nia thinned slightly, she crossed the room. Her heels were loud in the quieter space. Nia saw her coming, waited. Seo-yeon stopped in front of her. For a moment she said nothing. "I didn't know," she said finally. Her voice was lower than usual, stripped of its usual architecture. "I know you didn't," Nia said. "I was unkind." "Yes," Nia said simply. "You were." No cushioning, no performance of forgiveness, just the clean, quiet truth offered without cruelty and without comfort. Seo-yun nodded once. She had no script for this. For the first time in her life, she was in a room where her name meant nothing, and someone else's meant everything, and that someone was choosing to treat her with a dignity she had never once extended in return. It was the most humbling moment of her life. 3 weeks later, Nia left Hanul. Not in disgrace, not quietly. On her own terms, at her own time, for her own reasons. She packed the same 2 bags and the small backpack. She paused at the door of her dormitory room one last time. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel bitter. She felt clear, like a person who had always known the truth about herself and had simply waited, patiently, for the world to catch up. She had been an orphan, with no name, no family, no one in her corner. She had built a legacy. The world's most powerful institutions had spent 2 years chasing. She had sat in the front row while people called her nobody. And she had never, not once, needed their belief to keep going. Some people spend their whole lives performing for rooms that were never paying attention anyway. Nia never did. She built in silence. She moved in patience. She let the world underestimate her not because she was afraid, but because she understood something most people never learn. The right people will always find you. The right moment will always come. And when it does, no amount of doubt ever thrown at you will touch what you quietly became while they weren't looking. If someone has ever made you feel like you don't belong in a room, remember, Nia, you're not behind. You're not invisible. You're just not done yet.